All right. Well, hey, ReLeader, so glad that you're taking time to join us today. I got a really good friend of mine joining us today, Ben and his wife Amy. Amy's not with us, but Ben Kendrew is here with me, and Ben is a stud of a ReLeader. Most of our listeners are ReLeaders, and so this is a podcast for ReLeaders doing ReLeader business. And Ben's one of the best, man. Ben reached out to me over Instagram a long time ago, and
Mm.
Ben pastors an amazing church in New Zealand, and so we're actually having to coordinate our time zones here pretty creatively. So it's already tomorrow. That's why I'm always like, Ben,
That's
how's
right.
tomorrow? You're already in tomorrow, so tell me how tomorrow is.
I can tell
So
you,
he,
well, it's a beautiful day tomorrow, so look forward to that.
So Ben has been at Arise Church for a really long time, but Ben's church went through what many leaders experience, just some difficult times and a shift in leadership. And lucky Ben found himself in the middle of a mess, like most leaders do. And so Ben, thanks for hopping on, man. I'm just pumped to talk to you and our listeners to glean from you a little bit today.
Thank you, John. I'm truly honored that you'd like to have this conversation. Maybe others can, tune in and glean something from it. I guess I want to start just to acknowledge, maybe even let people know. I don't know what kind of first direction you wanted to go in, John, but I wanted to let people know how we came to connect. I actually was running in the midst of a pretty challenging season already, and you were on Pastor Craig Groeschel's leadership
Yeah,
podcast,
yeah,
and I think in preparation for the book, ReLeader book, to be released. And
yeah,
as you were discussing your story, and particularly when you referenced, I guess, that sense that you weren't called or hadn't ever really pioneered or
yeah,
planted in church settings or done that sort of break the ground role.
yeah.
But Pastor Craig asked you, what is it that you do? And you said,
Well,
fix broke stuff.
mhm.
Something hit me
Hmm.
deep in my spirit, to the point where I had to pause my run, stop the Strava record, and sit down on a park bench somewhere and
Wow.
listen to the rest of that conversation intently,
Wow.
because I felt understood to a level that I'm not sure I had for a long time. And maybe a
Mm.
conversation will highlight it, but we just realized as I shared a bit more over the coming days, weeks, months with Amy, it's been part of our grace, both in ministry and in other environments, to re-lead. So
Yeah.
I'm deeply, deeply grateful for that conversation for you with Pastor Craig, that what it
Yeah.
unlocked, because then it's been of a great source of encouragement, and now a friendship I value dearly. So thank you, John.
That's super cool, man. That means a ton to me. And man, Ben pastors one of, if not the largest church in New Zealand, 11 campuses, large organization. A lot, he's very humble. He's not going to tell you all those things, but I'll just rat him out. Great leader, got great teams, and is just doing an amazing job. And pretty early on in the process. And, if I remember right, your interim in 2022 became lead pastor in 23. Is that right?
Yeah, you've got it. That's right. In the middle of both those years. So middle of 2022, we were asked if we would be the interim lead. Should I give a bit of backstory now,
Please
John, or
do.
what's
Yes, yes, yes.
helpful? Yeah.
Please do. Let's give us some context.
Beautiful church that Amy and I would call ourselves a son and daughter of the house. Not our first church in either of our journeys. I grew up in beautiful Christian heritage, but for me, it was the church where I recommitted my life to the Lord as a young adult, as a university
Wow.
student. It was the church where I met Amy in our
Mm,
young adult years, where I made some of my lifelong friends, where
mm,
my potential was called out of me, where discipleship shaped me, through my late teens and into my 20s, and then as a married man and into fatherhood. This is my home. This is our
wow.
home. 20 plus years. 2003, I joined the church. I think it was about 5 or 6 months old. And
Mm,
30, 40, 50 people on a Sunday. So to be in this home, for that time, it's obviously so deeply significant. and when challenge came, when crisis arose, when there was both internal and external drama and pressure, media coverage for a church like
Yep.
ours in New Zealand ramped up pretty intensely. A lot of online commentary, and then a lot of, I guess, cultural challenges that came to the surface in 2022. It wasn't just like, oh, that's my workplace, or
Mm.
a place I've been part of for a few months. This was two
Wow.
decades of our life.
Wow.
So and we love it dearly. So we needed, like everyone in our team, still, and at the time, we really needed a God call to get stuck in and stay.
Mm.
And first, I guess first ask in the middle of 2022 was whether we could be interim lead pastors. Prior to that, we'd been a campus pastor role for one of the locations in New Zealand. And prior to that, 15 years on staff in various ministry roles, mostly youth and young adults, and worship. But we'd only been campus pastors since 2020. So through COVID,
Wow.
our experience, and we'd inherited a healthy, beautiful campus, and we're very grateful for that journey and transition. So even when we talk about releading, I'm like, I think, yeah, we've had the blessing, the privilege, the joy of inheriting both challenge and mess, and
Yep.
health and life,
Yep.
and various ministry roles there. Yeah. And
Yep.
then there was a pretty thorough process in 2023 that I'd really encouraged and endorsed our church and our board to go on for a God-led appointment for lead pastors, permanent lead pastors. And that was also our moment, we felt, and we got some great counsel from some other wise older pastors in New Zealand to say, this is your time now to actually ask God what he would have you do. I
Wow.
remember one saying to me, you don't want to be Jonah, Ben. God's asking you to do something and you run away, say, no, that's not me.
Mm.
That doesn't go well. But he said, you also don't want to be putting your hand up and forcing your way into something God's not
Right.
asking you to do.
Right.
That's not going to go well for you or the church. And
Yep.
I think that was good for us, John. Like, that was a period of time in the middle of 2023 for us to really seek the Lord. What are you
Mm.
asking? Remove obligation just because we've been interim, well-meaning, good friends, loved ones are saying you guys have got to do this.
Yeah.
But we needed to hear from the Lord. And I'm sure she won't mind me saying, but there were moments where Amy would say, I think I'm praying more, God, surely there's someone else.
Yeah. Choose someone else
Because
like Moses. Send someone else.
because of the state of things and the
Yeah.
uncertainty of those
Yep.
that kind of 18 months. But we
Yep.
know we had a conviction, we had a call, we trusted the process. It was still a pretty arduous process to present vision, to really sort of clarify for our board what we were believing for, why we felt we could steer this thing, the way we wanted to lead,
Mm.
based on our experience. So even that process opened our eyes and our heart a lot. But then in August of 2023, appointed as the lead
Mm.
pastors for a church that has actually now 10 plus online, so 10 physical locations
Okay.
around the
Yep.
country in New Zealand, spread right
Okay.
across the geography of the country. And so that makes it about 18 months in the role now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Which is just getting started in ReLeader terms. You obviously
Yeah.
have gotten through a lot and accomplished a lot, but it takes so long to really turn the ship around. What were some Our story is similar in a lot of ways, that I was a campus pastor before taking
That's
the lead
right.
pastor, and I was a CP for maybe 3 months. I remember for me, and that's why this question's framing off of what I even you talking about, that's taking me back to that time of, it's one thing to say I'm gonna take the helm and lead this organization, but there's also, like, you're in this massive learning curve. I remember thinking, okay, I got to learn how to preach every weekend. Like, that was a rhythm.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd preached a handful of times. It wasn't my very first sermon, but preaching every weekend is a different rhythm. So now I'm having
Mm.
to get that cadence, and that I'm trying to find comfort in my own skin on a platform that doesn't feel like my platform, while I'm taking people through trauma, congregation, staff, financial trauma.
Mm.
There's so many things, and I remember those times being so. At times, I've written about this at my ReLeader content. I think there were seasons where I really had imposter syndrome, where I fake it till I make it, because I think I know I can do this, and I know I'm called by God to do this. There's no question in my, and I feel a God confidence, but there's also this side of me that's
Mhm.
like, man, I hope I don't mess this up. What was some of that like for you? Because you and Amy were stepping in similar. You had been in ministry far longer than me, but there's still a newness to it. I'm assuming this was the first time you'd ever been a lead
100%.
pastor. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely clear on that. And I think, also helpful to understand in our context, content and loving life and the roles that I had fulfilled, youth and young adult ministry for a decade was a
Mm,
passion point, and to lead the campus that we'd called home for many years was an absolute joy.
mm,
And in our context, because this was, I guess, like very different circumstances for you, but like a lot of ReLeader environments, a surprise shock.
hmm.
No one
Yeah.
anticipated what we experienced in 2022. There had been no thought of, I wonder if one day.
Wow.
I can attest that I'd never thought about planting, and good friends may have stepped out, planted a campus of our church, or gone and launched something new in New Zealand or around the world. And I would ask them, "What's that feel like? Am I
Mm,
missing? Do I not
yeah.
hear God?" I think particularly because, as you've acknowledged, that gets celebrated a lot,
Yep.
as it should. We need pioneering, we need planting, we need plenty more churches around the globe. But I was more like, man, I like getting stuck in on something that's going. So that
Yep.
was part of my, I guess, even wrestling with imposter syndrome. Like you said, that was part of it. Like, do you have the makeup, Ben,
Mm,
the gift mix, that spearhead role that's required for a lead pastor, and to wrestle that out, knowing, like you said, a God call and a conviction, what He's put in my hand and in my heart,
mm,
and I don't usually struggle for confidence, John. I guess it's
yeah.
been a blessing, but certainly that first year, probably to be honest, right to late last year, um, still really like, oh God, have you got the right guy?
Wow.
Some examples. I mean, to be fair, I didn't preach weekly as a campus pastor. That's not how our model has functioned or does currently. We have a strong preaching team across the
Hmm.
country, and even still, that wasn't a requirement. There were other environments. I felt this is new. This is out of my depth. This is uncharted territory. Some of that senior leadership. Decision making for multiple environments. That was maybe where I felt more out of my depth. In the pulpit, I was more comfortable and confident. I could probably feel like for this
Yep.
half an hour, I can deliver what God's asked me to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely different environments that were, well, that strikes that imposter syndrome chord. I had a few certain moments. Uh, that maybe God started to deal with that. That I can even say I started this year with a new found godly confidence,
Mm,
and assurance in what we're here to do. And I know it's only when we're recording this, just the start of April, so we're only a
yeah.
few months in. But I did approach 2025 with some of that has been put to bed, and I thank the Lord for that. I
I
think
think
some
that
things that help.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I do think that that's about the right timeline, right? I think that's about the time, because I remember that I became lead pastor
That's
in
interesting to
November.
hear your thought. Yeah.
I became lead pastor in November of 2014. And I remember the day that I took the stage. It was in January of 16. So what was that, like 14 months, 15 months?
Right.
And I remember walking up on stage and thinking to myself, I belong here. Like for the first
Right.
time, like not in a possessive way, but this is my
Uh-huh.
pulpit. Like this is
Yeah.
my pulpit. Not again, that sounds terrible. But you know my heart.
I
This
understand.
is my church. I'm the lead pastor of this church, and I actually believe it for the first time. And I kind of had that confidence. And you think about that, that's crazy that it took 14, 16
Right.
months.
That's actually really helpful to hear. I'm sure I've heard you mention that, maybe that moment even before, but yeah, yeah, now that you've said that, I can earmark moments where maybe something shifted.
Yep.
But I'd certainly broach this year coming off, New Zealand kind of, our summer break is over the Christmas New Year time. It's beautiful
Yep.
time to reset with the natural calendar, and so to start this year with faith that
Mm,
I know I had at the start of last year, and we
mm,
reset vision for the church. We
yep.
redeclared our vision and values, that we were carrying in our heart with our newly formed leadership team, and these were big moments that I think up until it, I'm like, are you sure we do it? And I'm like, yeah, that was,
Mm,
that was sovereign. That was the sovereignty of God. But I needed to get through them first. I had another moment late last year, November, I think, so that's, yeah, again, that's 14 months in the role for me, where a conversation actually with a longtime friend that we'd done a lot of history, a lot of ministry, a lot of journey with, someone I credit with me coming back to the Lord. And we have,
mm.
ministry wise, we're in doing different things now, but he encouraged me in a conversation just by saying, I just really hope you get to lead the way you're made to lead. You and Amy, you're not trying to be what was, or you're not trying to be
Yep.
what other people ask. And it was a one nugget in the middle of a long conversation, but
Mm.
something struck. I actually told him this week how formative that had been for
Wow.
me, because it helped me go, actually, yeah, on these things I am. Maybe on these things I'm still trying to please people, or
Yep.
put on Saul's armor that doesn't fit, and I've taken
Yep.
most of it off, but I put this one
Yep.
still on. And yeah,
Dude.
maybe just the timing of that conversation was another one to say, hey, yeah, so that reference point, Saul's armor, that's long struck a chord with me.
It's
you
so
know,
good.
and obviously, if people aren't aware, it's Saul suggesting to David, please wear
Yep.
this armor as you go to fight Goliath. I want to look after you, but David's saying it doesn't fit. This isn't how I'm designed. Let me do it with my sling and my stones. And I've preached it. I've shared it with individuals. I've encouraged people who I can see are trying to be something else, but I had to live it, particularly
Yep.
last year. And I think maybe part of it was I'm not wearing as much of Saul's armor anymore. And lo and behold, there's a different grace.
Oh.
The stones are flying better, because I can do things the way God's made me a little more.
You're being you. And those, it's
Yeah.
funny, man, I'm having all these flashbacks. So
Mm.
all of these kind of moments in time where I had these same kind of what we might call formative moments of realization or something. And then I remember there's probably 3 years between that 3 to 4 year mark that I finally began to see the culture shift. Because for a long time I just felt like I was just throwing down seeds, seeing no fruit, seeing nothing, 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 nothing. And those are the years where you just feel like you're banging your head against the wall, where you feel like you're just on a hamster wheel running because I'm running
Mhm.
hard and my RPMs are going really high, but my speedometer is not going really high. And I think it was really around that 3 to 4 year mark that internal culture
Right.
started to shift. And that's the other thing I was going to ask you to get your perspective on. And again, if there's listeners that are running a business, it might not fit quite as the same as in a church. But one thing I noticed early on was there was two cultures I had to work on and two groups. Right, there's everything outward facing. So for a businessman or woman, that could work too. So there was this outward facing, in our context would be a congregation, and then there's an inward facing, which is the staff. And in the trauma of the moment, what I found, I'm curious to see what it is for you. Everybody that was going to leave left, right? So we lost 35, 40% of our church just up and vanished.
Mhm.
And the people that stayed, they stayed for a reason, right? They saw something in me, or they just loved the church, or they loved what, for whatever reason, they stayed. And so I felt like they were with me.
Mhm.
But I actually found that it was harder in the early years. It was harder to help to change the culture of my staff. I actually had a harder time internally than I did outward facing, because most of the congregation were like, "Yep, he's our guy. I like this guy. I'm getting to know him. Whatever it is about me they liked." But internally, it's like I had to prove myself. And I'm curious if
Mhm.
that how that was for you. Did the culture of your staff rally? Like, um, was there or is there, some, you gotta be careful, some of your staff will listen to this podcast, but is there
I hope so.
resistance? Did you feel
Yeah.
resistance
Mm.
from the culture accepting you as the new leader?
Yeah, I mean, you were saying, was there before, as you're framing the question, and I was going to say, or was this something that you've navigated? I would say, is it? I mean, we're obviously, still, as you say, just in this infancy of our ReLeader journey. And the short answer is yes. I think we also had, I mean, what I'm so deeply, deeply grateful for the staff team from when, particularly from when we were appointed, middle of 2023. I think there had already been, the departure of people, many I love,
Hmm.
had relationship with from the
Yep.
staff team, done ministry with for a long time, that had made their call and felt their prompt, particularly if it was to step into something new in terms of ministry, or if their season was done, or if their heart was, no longer in the roles they were fulfilling. That had happened probably during our interim time. And I think if there was something about that interim season, I did feel a check in my spirit from the Lord that this is kind of holding things in place,
Mm.
but not, we had to address some culture, obviously, but not like establish culture, values, and a vision until such a time as because we still had that from
Yep.
from my predecessors, from our founding
Yep.
pastors
Yep.
that could hold that. And I felt, and I mean, I got notebooks of things from while we were interim, from prayer retreat days or whatever, of
Mm.
things that actually came out a year later, or 8 months
Mm.
later in our vision season once
Yep.
we were appointed. But I held that,
Good.
and in the interim time, I think that's when a lot of that sifting happened. And I mean that sifting in like the positive or the very literal
Yeah.
sense, like people making their calls. So then when we were appointed, we felt a rally around for sure.
Good.
I would just take a moment to acknowledge the campus pastors who are our peers, many of them older than us or had been in that role longer than us, certainly.
Mm.
The heart posture, the rally around, the prayer for us, the first time we could gather as a group, as us as lead pastors and the campus pastors together, was profound.
Mm.
Presented us with a beautiful, it's called a taonga, that's Māori language for a precious gift. And
Wow.
the thought and the verse etched into that, prayed
Mm.
for us. That these were moments that when I say, okay, now you move from I'm doubting myself to wow, look at who God's brought around.
Wow.
Wider staff, which already had gone from, I mean, our church had been a staff of 110, 120 pre-crisis. It was already down to the 80s, and that was both necessary for the size and scale of the church now and financially and so on. But
Yep.
also that was people saying, okay, I think I've done what God's asked me to do, and bless them and release them as they step into the next. And then those that stayed, I would say overall, like a heart to say we're here to do what God's called us to do. and for until such a time as he says otherwise.
Yeah.
But the proving yourself, or we will also tread cautiously, it was and is real. I get that. I don't begrudge that. I don't
Sure.
think I've felt resistance, to be honest, in our 18 months. I think I've felt high caution.
Hmm.
And we went from an environment that did not have high feedback to an environment that was, well, the pendulum swung hard the other way for 2 years.
Yeah.
But both from the world and online and comment threads, whatever, that's irrelevant. But from our church community and from the staff, a very open door now to share. In fact, we had to, get counsel and guidance on how to rein that back into a healthy
Mm.
and through healthy channels. But because of that, we might make a decision that was like, okay, that's a step of faith, or that's a bit of a challenge. That's gonna empower someone and maybe inadvertently hurt someone else. That now for us, for me, is coming with, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure?
Yeah.
From well-meaning, great-spirited staff, because
Yeah.
I'm not really looking for lemmings, minions,
That's right.
just
That's right.
jump
Yeah.
in line and say yes, sir. But it does slow things,
It
and
does.
it does challenge. I know we were chatting even just before we hit record, but about the thickening of skin,
Yep. Yep.
and without the hardening of a heart, that old phrase, you need thick skin and a soft heart.
Yep.
Probably with our staff more, I
Yep.
need to hear their thought, their prayer, their input, but at times we also need to lead.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
So
we're probably just right
Ben
in the throes of it.
Ben gave me an idea for an article that you'll see come out soon when we were talking about thick skin, trying to develop thick skin, soft heart. And I was like, I wrote notes. I'm like, that's an article. I'm going to write an article about that.
Come
You
on.
talked earlier about your lead team, and it sounded like you did a restructure. Not maybe you have your own. You brought in your own lead team. Not to say that some of those weren't on the lead team before. The reason I want to ask you about this is because I think it's one of the critical steps in leading is there's a lot of things you have to do as a leader that you do slowly. I've written about that, but I counsel people that one of the first things you need to do quickly is get your lead team, um, get your people surrounded you. This is at the forefront of my mind because I had a coffee with the pastor this week that has been at his church for 2 or 3 years as a leader, and he's got the same lead team that his predecessor had. And he just straight up told me, I don't even like going to work. He's like, I don't look forward to it. I wake up in the morning and I don't even want to go because I'm not gonna say his name obviously, but he was like, I don't even like these people. And I was like, well, man, what are you waiting on? You got to get your people surrounding you. And I do think it's a critical step in leading because you really do need your mighty men, to use the David reference, people that are going to surround you. Not that they have to be men. I believe in women leadership, but talk to about that. Like, how did you go about that? How quick did you do that?
Mm.
How critical was that for you of getting surrounding yourself with the right people?
Yeah, critical is the right word. We did inherit some, but to be frank, what was the pre-existing leadership team also had that season of, okay, a number of them are moving on.
Right.
And again, that's probably, people I would openly say long relationship and a lot of love for them and ongoing. Some I'm
Yep.
still uh, connect with from time to time. And so we didn't necessarily have the opportunity to just take pre-existing leadership team and
Yep.
now that's ours. There are some, or in fact, actually now one that would have been pre-crisis on that senior leadership team that
Yep.
is on ours. But yeah, I mean, how we went about that initially, the first thing was, and I was part of helping shape this with a sort of wise counsel eldership kind of room through that interim season, that we were going to have a role of great significance in a general manager kind of role oversight of operations, a range of skills that I don't have, or we don't expect the lead pastor to have, to work alongside. The
Yep.
appointment of that was critical. I am so grateful to be highly involved, obviously, for it to be spirit-led, someone that their testimony, Donovan's his name, if he's to watch this
Hmm.
one day, I'm so grateful for Donovan being called by God out of the corporate world, to step
Wow.
into an environment that was so uncharted for him, but has been a godsend.
Mm.
And then we together actually worked to form a leadership team, and obviously, sorry, including my wife, Amy.
Yeah.
So once he was appointed, that's when we reset. Okay, here's the team staffing wise, the kind of structure we want to flow with. And that helped us form, okay, so here's what we need in the leadership team. And here are some people who were with us through that interim period. They fit the bill, the heart, the skills, the culture. Um, and that's who we got at the moment. I think I do want to, like, that's mostly talking about, and staffing and the leadership of the church in that capacity. I think I do want to acknowledge when you say the people around you promptly and articulating that. I mean, I was very proactive in who is in my world,
Yeah.
external wise counsel, older senior pastor, retired senior pastor, reaching out to yourself, finding that both here in New Zealand and Australia, actually a number of us stepping into re-leading roles in ministry in the church. And so the way I actually made a note as I was before we jumped on this morning, I proactively pursued fatherly voices,
Mm.
brotherly voices, and then friendly voices is the best word I could
Yeah.
come up with.
Yeah.
But fatherly, have experienced some of this before, are going to give counsel, not saying do this or else.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but wrap that around brotherly. We're doing similar things. We've seen things. We've some taken over in great health and a beautiful transition, some in crisis and drama. But what are you seeing? How are you navigating it? How are we going? And then when I say friendly voices, like I really lean into the people that make me laugh, the people that bring out the joy, the people for us in our life group genuinely who are just like, man, I'll pick up
Yeah.
the kids, but then, our boys are going to play together, but come on, let's enjoy a Friday evening. Is there a sport game on?
Absolutely.
Whatever. But I was proactive. So at the
Good.
same time as like, you need a leadership team who's going to work this thing with you. I was also like, man, you
For
know,
you. Yeah.
for me, yeah.
Yep.
So I know
That's
they're
so
two
good.
different conversations, but actually were happening about the same time.
Mm.
And even as in the interim role, to be fair, those fatherly and brotherly voices in the interim role were a lifeline.
It's so good. Such
Yeah.
a good point. And what I have found in a pattern with a lot of leaders I talk to is, for the most part, they don't need. They sometimes, yes, they don't all the time, or as often need um, what we might use the word consulting. A lot of times they're sharp. They're sharp leaders, or they wouldn't be in the role
Mm.
they're in. They have good instincts for the most part. They do the right things for the right reasons. What I have found, what leaders more than anything is just encouragement, because it's such a discouraging
Oh
process.
man.
And you don't become a leader to be famous, because there are no famous leaders. Leaders are people who are willing to be in the shadows and just do the dirty work. And
Mhm.
so, what in that process, what would you say? Or maybe it's a current process, it can be past or present. Like, what has been one of the bigger challenges of this journey of releading? Like, it can be organizationally, it can be personally, it can be emotionally, mentally, spiritually. What's been some of the most difficult parts for you personally, or you and Amy, in this journey?
Uh, like I think the biggest one, let's say past and present, the best phrase I could use is relational grief.
Hmm.
Relational grief. the loss of long-held, deeply loved relationships, or
Mm.
the change, and as we know, change is loss if
Yep.
something is quite different, because there may be some we maintain relationship with, but it isn't what it once was. And
Yep.
I think like I know
Mm.
my makeup as well. I know I'm an extrovert by pure definition. I feed off other people, time with other people,
Yep.
and those relationships. Then if something is severed, I mean, I would say historically, I would fight to not lose a relationship, which is a little detrimental in ministry because someone moves on or sees things differently, and you actually can't shepherd people that have moved countries or
Right. Right.
planted into another church. I'm talking like as a youth pastor,
Right.
that would grieve me. But now that this whole experience, why I referenced getting fatherly voices because I lost some. I lost
Mm.
people that had discipled and mentored me for many, many years,
Wow.
and I left a massive hole in my life. And then yeah, some on that peer friend level. So I think that for me, with my emotional makeup, I knew that was
Yep.
the hardest. I mean, we've referenced earlier imposter syndrome in terms of like, what am I doing here?
Mm.
I think what held me through that is a level of confidence. Like if God put you here, it's on him.
Mm.
It's kind of
Yeah.
how
It's
I
so
approached a
good.
lot of life.
Yep. Yep.
Jeremiah 1, that's what was part of the call for me when we were
Mm.
newly married into ministry was, saying to God, like Jeremiah does, I'm too young. And
Wow.
I'm too, and I don't know how many
Fill
times
in the
I've preached
blank.
this
Yeah.
now, but I'm too whatever. And
Yep.
just God's abrupt response, do not say I'm too anything. If I'll give you the words, I'll show you where to go.
Mm.
Jeremiah 1 is my calling passage to
Wow.
ministry. And so it came to the fore again through this. So I say that just to say that helped with the imposter syndrome is and was real, particularly in any moments that's like a first time. Like I remember attending something that wasn't our event, a wonderful conference event in our country, attending it as the first time as the lead pastor of Arise Church. And I'm like, what? You read the lanyard or someone shakes your hand at the door. And I'm just, what am I doing here? Like this, and you do that once, and the next time is a little more comfortable, and you
Yep.
realize people were so warm and encouraging
Yep.
and thankful and praying for you. So,
Mm.
or the first time you've got to do something, for me, in the lead role, the way we're set up as a campus pastor, didn't have the responsibility to present in a board environment, and so to do those environments for the first time. But I know that I like do it once. All right, I can do that now. Let's go.
Yep.
So imposter syndrome is a real challenge, but it kind of decreases. Yeah, Jeremiah and
Every
Gideon
year. Yeah. Every year you get
always
a
like
little more comfortable in your own
every
skin.
every first time. But the relational grief, I mean, and just want to, I guess, make sure I round out like uh I don't cry myself to sleep every night, but that's because we've done the work. Amy and I
Mm.
have lent on proper supervision, Christian counseling, those
Good.
fatherly and motherly voices, that spiritual wise counsel with many decades.
Mm.
And I think maybe for us, because partly it was, oh wow, this is quite new territory, crisis like this. I actually shared with a group of pastors a few weeks ago, um, that I actually recognized I had a really blessed run in ministry. Like
Mm.
we were favored, and God's hand has been upon this church. And so to be in
Mm.
an age group ministry role, a campus pastor role, worship and creative roles, you got to ride on the grace of God and the flow of the church,
Mm.
even when there was challenge, of course. And look, we were the campus pastors, announced in February 2020, March, COVID, and New Zealand shuts down and the world shuts down. So it's not, or the city we live in, Christchurch, had a devastating earthquake in 2011. when we're young adult pastors and worship pastors, and almost 200 lives lost in the city, and
Mm.
literally falls to rubble, which we could talk about one day, because the lessons learned from just being in a city after a natural disaster,
Mm.
we've rallied, or sorry, drawn on, Amy and I, after being in a crisis in your church world.
Yep.
It's actually amazing how many
It's a rebuild.
similarities there were.
I mean,
It's
it's
a
a rebuild.
rebuild.
It is.
But we know there was challenge over those years, but actually so much of this was foreign to us. So
Mm.
then getting someone who's in their 60s, 70s saying, "Oh, Ben, this isn't the first church to go through this, and possibly won't be the last.
Yep.
And I'm
Yep.
still standing, and God is faithful."
Yep. Man, you
That's
said
what we needed.
you said something that was really cool that gave me a picture of what a re-leader is, and you talked about how the grace of God has been on Arise Church, and I don't know if I can't remember, you said we rode that wave or something, and leave it to somebody from New Zealand to use a surfing metaphor. We don't think about that in Texas or Oklahoma, but I really thought about that. Like a lot of times, what a re-leader does is an organization before the re-leader gets there has caught a wave and has ridden that wave of grace and favor and riding waves. I've surfed before, believe it or not. I have. I'm not very good at it, but I have.
Probably more than me, to be honest.
And so you ride that wave, right? And riding the wave is fun. That's the fun part. It
Hmm.
seems as though at the end of every wave is not a crash, but you're going to fall. You're going to, come down off the wave. It seems as though a lot of times what the re-leader's job is to do is to turn the surfboard back around and get on it and start paddling back out
Paddle out.
because we got to catch another wave. And that's the hard part, when
Mhm.
you're paddling out, your arms get tired, your chest gets rubbed raw on the surfboard. I've had that happen, and it's a grind and it's a hard work. But
So
the hope of every leader is that we can go back out
that's right.
and wait for the next move of God and keep our eyes on the horizon for the next wave and turn this thing back around and have another move of God. And let's
You got
the
it.
grace, another wave of grace is coming, and let's get back on. And so I think that's an endurance thing for leaders to really understand
Spot
that,
on.
man, we're playing a critical role here. It's not sexy. No one's noticing what we're doing, but we're paddling hard to go back out into deep water so that God can do another move of God. And it's such a critical step that the read leader has to do. It's thankless many times. It's hard. It's brutal, but it's such an important step. What would you say? And I want to respect your time, but what would you say is if you were talking to a re-leader that is kind of, so you're several years in, a couple years in now, if there's somebody that's kind of just taken over the helm of a ship, an organization, what were some of those landmines maybe that you stepped on or avoided, some of those things that popped up and were more challenging for you, whether it was financial or staffing, or is there any particular things that surface up that if you did lose sleep at night, what was the main thing that we might be able to help some real leaders with today?
Hmm. Oh yeah, no shortage of those, John, as you well know.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, just to jump, that's a beautiful and powerful analogy, because I
yeah,
think, as even as you were saying it, if you were to watch surfing, they don't really put the camera on the guy paddling out the
they
back,
sure don't.
but the camera's on the one catch the wave. And then
Yep.
you said keep your eyes on the horizon. I mean, I felt maybe for some one person tuning in,
Mm,
the tide, the waves, it's such a wonderful picture of God's faithfulness,
mm,
because there will be another wave, there'll be another set, there will be. He is faithful. His mercies are new every morning. He will
yeah.
continue to move. I'm sure it's a wonderful passage for many readers, but we got right stuck into Nehemiah, actually, even before I got hold of your book, and then that helped unpack things with Nehemiah
Yep.
and Zerubbabel, and it's helped us, obviously, particularly staff and church. But in the midst of that, one phrase from Nehemiah early that he said, "The gracious hand of God is upon us." And
Mm,
I found that I just needed to remind myself of that daily, declare it often,
mm,
from pulpits, in conversations, in messaging, whatever app or
yep.
platform you're using, that the
Yep.
gracious hand of God is upon us. And as you were just using that analogy, I'm just like, another wave is coming. And it might look a little different to the one before, or it's
That's right.
smaller. Well, the waves work I'm like, I mean, you're extrapolating the analogy too much, Ben, but if they
No,
come
it's
usually in
great.
sets of seven, the first six aren't that impressive. And then you catch the seventh and wow, look at it
Wow.
go. And I don't
Wow.
know, maybe we're paddling between waves two and three, I reckon, right
Wow.
now.
And
Someone might
discerning,
be.
right? And we're beating this analogy to death, but it's a good analogy. But waiting for the right wave, right? How do
That's
we know?
it.
How do we discern when
Yeah.
to paddle and turn this thing around and hop up? But you could use a lot of energy to try to catch a wave that doesn't ever take shape.
It's not,
So
yeah, yeah, that's
we
it.
need discernment, don't we? My gosh.
Discernment. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, that's right. And a willingness, though. This one is actually going to help me for a while. We'll catch this one back to shore.
Yep.
Uh, and then we'll paddle back out. Okay, so then maybe let me circle back to the question of landmines or challenges. I
Yeah.
mean, certainly financially,
Yep.
uh, both our church crisis and the economic climate of New Zealand, and I know around most of the developed world, things are very difficult. And I've got faith, no problem. I know God is building his church, and it's his responsibility to resource the vision and the mission, if it is indeed his and
Yeah.
come from him. And so I can hold faith whilst recognizing right now that wave. I mean, this is maybe one of the landmines or things to prepare for. You can have both life and hope, and wow, look at what God is doing.
Mm.
And this sucks. Why is that going backwards on the same breath?
That is
You
so
know,
true.
I
So
shared with
true.
our staff this week. Just reread Acts, studied Acts again to start the year. Faith is high, but I found just how often in the space of few verses, and many were added, and many believed, or this person was healed, and then there was challenge, and then they were
Mm,
arrested, and then they went
mm,
without, and that
mm,
was just unfortunately unavoidable.
mm.
And I think I do want, I probably historically was like, we're all flying and all metrics are up and to the right, or everything's down and to the left and it's challenge. But actually, in
Wow.
re-leading and probably in most leadership, I think, however many years deep, it's both and all the time. So for
Wow.
us, like right now, where we're at as a church across the nation, praise God, number of souls being saved is up on last year and the year before. Praise God,
Mm,
Sunday attendance is increasing. Probably my biggest celebration point, um, volunteerism, willing to serve and build. We understand why that took a massive hit in 2022, 2023. And what we navigated was, challenges to the care of people and cultures that maybe had gotten a little unhealthy, whatever it might have been.
yep.
So then there's a pause and a caution to serve. Well, that is coming back as God is
Wow.
moving with a vibrancy to
Mm,
hear that that's the case in other churches in our part of the world as well. Praise God.
mm.
So these signs of life, wow, people are gathering again, people are serving again. And wait a minute, how come the dollars aren't going in
Wow.
that direction? Or
Wow.
how come in this campus, those two are going north, but the small groups aren't. And I think I'm learning as well and leading and
Wow.
caring and encouraging our campus pastors, many of whom are leaders, have inherited something in
Yep.
whatever season. Some we've appointed, and some had picked up a mantle before we were the lead pastors. But what I'm encouraging them is to be able to acknowledge the beauty, the gracious hand of God is upon us. And
Mm,
Nehemiah said that while the wall was in rubble.
that's so
So
good.
they're not
Man,
mutually exclusive.
that's so good. And that's a good word for every leader to hear, that we don't find our fulfillment or our joy on whether we're having a good day or a bad day. We can actually be having a good day and a bad day at the same time and not
You
realize
got
it.
it.
If we just come into the realization that that's such a good truth, man, that it's not either or, it's and both. We can actually be experiencing the biggest highs and the lowest lows on the same day, but that doesn't have to shift my heart and what
Mhm.
we're called to do. Man, that's rich. And I know exactly where that is. That's like it's in chapter 1 or chapter 2 where he says the gracious hand is upon us. And
Yeah,
he's standing in a field full of rubble when he says it.
that's it. So we have to decide first that we actually believe that as the
Wow,
leader, and that
man, that's
I've
really
got
good.
conviction and courage. He is. I remember saying it as the interim lead in rooms that it was like, well, it does not look or feel like the gracious hand of God is upon us,
Mm,
especially if we do it in comparison to what we have experienced or thought the gracious hand of God looked like in seasons
wow.
past, as a church that was flying and flourishing and genuinely impacting a nation. Well, it doesn't look like that right now. So, is it? Is the
Mm,
gracious hand of God upon us? And I took a lot of courage from Nehemiah's leadership to understand it's not actually dependent on he's not just saying that once the war's finished. He's not just
yep.
saying that when Sanballat's gone. He's not just saying
Yep.
that when all the money is flowing back into the right places.
Mm,
He was saying that from chapter 1 right through to the reforms.
it's
and
so
and I
good.
believe it. I believe the gracious hand of God is upon our church. I believe that that would be the case
Mm,
for anyone who's called by God to re-lead. If it's
mm,
a divine appointment, man, like you might not see it today. Today might look like rubble, but he is for us. He's not against us. I don't know, John. I like
dude.
created new playlists. I'm a worshiper, but I created a playlist in the midst of it called Through the Storm. I found every worship song that I could that was basically like, Christ is my firm foundation, obviously a
Yep.
classic right
Yep.
now, but
Yep.
lyrically declaring that God will carry through. He is working.
Mm,
I got to a season where it was like now faith, songs that declare the bigness, the power,
mm,
the impact of God. I started sharing them with staff or even telling church, and people start like following them on Spotify, just songs that
wow.
get me my morning started. Um, and so maybe for others, it's not necessarily a worship playlist, but what other things that are going to remind you of
Mm.
God's character and what He's called you to.
I love that. And I was going to ask you, what are some practical things you did? And that's a perfect example of what a leader can do. I talk to leaders a lot that are like, things are nothing is. I feel like nothing's going good. How do I present or project myself as a positive leader? How do I cast vision in the midst of feeling like there's no momentum? And I think you just told leaders how to do that. It's a it's a frame of mind and understanding that two things can be true at once. And
Um,
leaders have to be really good at exercising faith and trusting the Lord in the midst of what seems like rubble. And to be able to declare the gracious hand of the Lord is upon me when it doesn't feel like it, that is faith. that is
that's
just
right.
having an abundance of faith in the midst of all of it. Dude, I love that. I I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this podcast myself because I think you just unlocked something. I think you just unlocked something really profound for real leaders there, man. So thank you for sharing
Amen.
that. That's rich. Well,
for
man, listen,
sure.
I want to respect your time. I'll have you back on sometime. It's always good to, we'll
Honored.
circle back every couple of years and be like, how's it now? How's it
Yeah.
now? How's it now? And we'll just watch it all progress. So, man, if people want to
Yeah.
follow you or, follow along with Arise Church and what's happening or follow along with you or even get into contact with you, is there a social media, you're on Instagram, any of those kind of things that they can follow?
Yeah, sure. I mean, at the church website, you'll see obviously what we are doing as a family, as a community. It's arisechurch.com.
Yep.
So please, but for me, just probably the simplest would be Instagram.
Yep.
It's my name with NZ for New Zealand at the end. So Ben Kendrew NZ. And you know what? This is kind of funny because I've actually just been, I haven't really shared this just with a few trusted people who are pressing my buttons to say, hey, you told me you were going to do something and you haven't yet. But I've been preparing. I actually studied journalism, John, before we were married and then stepped into ministry roles. And I
Hmm.
love writing. I think it's part of
Okay.
why we've connected well. I love your writing, the book and the
Huh.
Substack. So
Yeah.
anyway, I've been plugging away at things that will go on a Substack is going to get underway this month, so April
Sweet.
25.
Okay.
So
Give us the
that's
handle.
coming soon.
How do they
It's going
find
to be
it?
called. It's actually not set up, but I can.
Okay.
It's going to
So,
be called All Things Considered, but I think people searching my name will
well,
probably
and
find it.
I'll put it as a recommended Substack on my Substack page.
Oh, beautiful.
So if for all the listeners out there, if you want to go follow it, just go find it on my Substack and we can put it in the show notes and stuff. So,
Got
man,
to do it
that's
now.
amazing.
Got
That's
to upload the first one now.
that's awesome. Well, tag me or like send it to me so I can subscribe and help promote
Oh,
it.
thank you, my
And
friend.
I'll give everybody Ben's personal cell phone number. It is, I'm just kidding. Man, thank you. I
Thank you,
appreciate you so
John.
much. You're an amazing leader. You're doing a good work. You're doing things behind the scenes, paddling out and paddling back out to the next wave, whatever we
Paddling
want to
back
call it.
out.
You're doing an incredible job. Proud of you.
Thank you, John. And I am, as started, so deeply grateful. It was a good God appointment. I'm thankful for that podcast. Thank you, Pastor Craig Rochelle, for introducing the world to John and to your ministry. Thank you, John, for articulating and by the Holy Spirit, what it is to be a re-leader. And
Mm,
I know full well that that is a huge, huge number of people, as you've declared, in ministry and workplaces and families and sports environments. But there's a grace and a call for it, and I'm
yeah.
here for it. I just want to
Amen.
celebrate all things re-leader, and I'm grateful for your encouragement.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks, listeners, for checking it out. We'll talk soon. Appreciate it.